I'm Andy. I'm going to be giving a talk on ESModules and Node. This is a GIF of a kind of a yellow car that's spinning around. It looks kind of fast. Seems to be enjoying itself, just spinning around. Doesn't have to go anywhere. It's all great. All right. So yeah, this talk is about ESModules and Node. Who here has written in the ESModule syntax, the bottom one? That's great. Who is currently writing it through Babel? Same people, yeah. So this talk, I'm not going to go through the syntax because I assume everyone pretty much knows it. If you don't, the top bit, that's like Common.js Node style, and they just need to change it to be the bottom bit. You can read it in a blog post. There's actually a mistake here that I've intentionally left in. If you can spot it, good for you. I'll talk about it later. So this talk, I'm going to go over the history, like how do we get to this point of modules and why is it a little bit weird? And then I'm going to talk about the tricky bits, or the gubbins, or the gubbiny weird bits. The second bit is a little bit dry because I'm talking about a spec. There's not much I can do about that. I try to keep the gubbin levels low. Hopefully we don't get too caught up in it. Should be all right. The whole basis of this talk is you should be able to come out with a better idea of what's going on with Node and ESModules. And then you can do some more waiting, pretty much. Yeah. Cool. So first things first. History. Woo! Okay. So early on in my career, I was building web apps for banks, me personally. This was around the time where you didn't really have web apps, so you could get away with anything. It was the best. It was a simple time. If you wanted to have something that's made out of multiple files, you just concatenate them. Maybe minify if you're feeling a bit fancy. You could have a loading bar. It was awesome, like Gmail. Loading bars. It's all great. Also, fun fact, JS devs were really rare at that time as well. If you got into JavaScript, it was usually through some other language, like you were a Java developer, and you were forced to use JavaScript because someone had a hunch that the web would be a big thing. It was a great, simple time. It was lovely. We'd end up writing files like this. So, of course, we're all dealing with, because you're just concatenating files, they're all on the global namespace. So you'd have kind of an agreement with the developers around you not to trash each other's stuff. I used to write code like this. The namespace bit would create a kind of like a tree of objects. And does anyone remember these backwards for loops for performance? Yeah, they're fun, weren't they? It's it's great times. Yeah, in reality, it was the worst. It was really shit. It was a terrible way to develop. I'm going to swear a lot because I've been through this part, these early days. I'm allowed to. So we had globals, fucking globals. Dependency management didn't exist. That's shit. Unit testing. So the differences between browsers were so big that you could only run unit tests in some browsers, and even then it would take fucking long. Debugging, wank. You were lucky to be able to log something. You had Firebug, that was a brand new thing. No one really kept to any, they kept to rough standards, but you come across a browser difference every single day of your development life. There's always be something weird that you got caught out with. I remember chasing, even IE7 had these weird, memory islands. So if an element still had reference to its to the thing that was calling it. Even if that element was destroyed, you'd still have some stuff in your heap. Oh, nightmare. Terrible. Luckily, things were getting better. And at that time, some server-side JavaScript was showing up. Ooh. This is great. Stuff like Rhino. Does anyone remember Rhino? No one remembers Rhino? Yeah, people remember Rhino. It was fun. JVM. So around this time, CommonJS started appearing. This was done in a way to kind of standardize server-side JavaScript. It was based on the assumption that, what's the best way to put it? The differences that we had with browsers was a big pain, and it's a big pain to get them back to one standard. With server-side JavaScript, as this stuff is flourishing, if we keep to a standard early on, then we won't have the same problems that we've just previously been through. We don't repeat the mistakes that we did with browsers. That was the kind of the concept behind CommonJS. A cool thing they took was the module pattern. You've seen this before? It's like, it's basically a way of declaring a thing and like, oh, look, you can have almost private functions. That's all nice. So CommonJS took that, added a few bits to it. Now, here's a neat trick. If you kind of like cover the first and last lines, that's a node module. That's a CommonJS node module. And that's pretty much how node modules work. The top and bottom get essentially appended to a file. You have exports and require that are just for that module, plus some extra bits that are specific to that module as well, and everything all works out fine. It's lovely. CommonJS was actually more than just this kind of, again, block out the first and last lines, more than this module pattern. They also had like a disk API that was all specified, network API, and the big thing was it didn't actually have async I/O, which meant that Node.js ended up kind of falling out with CommonJS. So CommonJS, if you actually try and find out what's happening with it at the moment, you'll see that it's pretty dead. And the reason why Node.js and CommonJS broke up, aside from like these, the lack of async I/O, which is kind of a big thing with Node, it was kind of more down to the route that CommonJS was going down. CommonJS, they were coming up with standards before things got popular or before things were being used. So you end up with quite a bit of bike shedding. Node.js felt that this was kind of holding it back, and so it just went in its own special direction. People were coming up with standards before people really knew what server-side JavaScript was meant to be. So Node.js was weird and young when I was doing all these weird kind of experimental stuff. A lot of it's been deprecated away. You can probably get some early alphas and betas or whatever, check this stuff out. Some stuff has stuck around. So fun fact, with all these 4 locations, if a module isn't in node modules, you can actually load it from there. So if you specify a node path, it will pick up modules from there. .node modules, .node libraries. If you really want to piss someone off with kind of a prank, and less of a prank and more of, one of those annoying pranks where people just hate you, you can put modules into these locations. And watch people get really angry. Don't do it. But this is the price of iteration. You have this stuff kind of left behind. There's some weird stuff that Node still has to contractually deal with and handle. So while this is all going on, where are the real standards? Like, where are the parents and all this? Like, Node.js doing crazy shit. ECMA! Yay! So ECMA originally stood for the European Computer Manufacturers Association. Old people hate them. And they only changed their name. It's actually Ecmo International, European Association for Standardizing Information and Communication Systems. So if anyone ever asks you what Ecmo stands for, it doesn't stand for anything. If you try and make an acronym out of the last bit, EIFCS, not going to fly. So JavaScript, when it was first created, it was registered with Ecmo within the first year. So they've been there since year one. Now, Ecmo and ECMAScript. ECMAScript is technically Ecmo 262. They have a technical committee, that's TC39. Everyone aware of TC39? They're lovely people, they're great. There's also other technical committees, TC26. They deal with acoustics, completely unrelated to JavaScript, but I found that out. So the different published versions of ECMAScript, they took a while to get out. Some of them, there's a gap of about 10 years, which is pretty bad. Don't talk about ES4. It's fun to read up on it. There's a load of drama, people accusing other people of lying. It's great. But for ES5, ES6, the technical committee really started to polish up the process and handle the new popularity of JavaScript. So now we have editions of ECMAScript coming out every year, pretty much, which is great. Part of that is down to Babel and people being able to experiment and try these new standards. But with modules, that actually came out in ES6 modules, 2015. It's been a while now. It's been a while. So the people behind this module pattern that's coming out of ECMAScript, or came out of ECMAScript, or Ecmo, DC, I don't know. That's actually some of the same people that were behind Node. So a lot of this stuff gets kind of influenced and back influenced, and it's all a big mishmash. It's not really an us versus them kind of thing. Like CommonJS just happens. We have this other thing in parallel. But Node, we're trying to actually join this stuff back together. So ECMAScript modules look like this. It's all lovely. It's mainly a thing for the web, which makes sense if you've ever done web development. I assume you've all done web development. It's great. I'm actually very excited about having like first-party support for ECMAScript modules in a browser. Personally, I tried teaching JavaScript to other people, and one of the first things that comes out once they start to get going is, hey, how do I split this into multiple files? And you have to go like, yeah, so you have to download Node, and it's like, yeah, it's not fun. But the other thing that I'm really genuinely excited about is if you've ever written like a React component or like some kind of Vue widget or whatever that has to import some third-party widget, and they normally have a help page, and it's like, hey, you have to put the script tag on your page. Like if ECMAScript modules become standard, they should just be publishing a module, which means you can just import it in, even if it's a dynamic import, and it's all cached, and you don't have to do that thing where when your component gets mounted, you add something into, you create a script tag, and when your component gets destroyed or whatever, you have to remove the script tag. Like, all that's gone. I hate that. It's going to be better. I like it. But why did Ecmo go for this rather than CommonJS? Like, what's the deal? OK, we're in the second half now. I warned you earlier, this is the gubbin zone. It's going to get dry. It's going to get gubbiny. Shallow gubbins. So this is Node.js's, this is like a load of common JS stuff. You go like this. Oh, go back and forth. Whenever you come across the require statement, as you all should know, you hit the disk, load up that file, start executing it, see what it comes out with, then go back to the original file you're in, carry on executing. If you come across another require statement, oh, look, we go to BJS, grab that thing, come back out, it's all great. Can anyone think of why that would be bad for web? So is there like hands in the air? Oh, you sir.
Lots of repeating requests.
Yeah, and you're hitting the disk. So that red line that was slowly drawing out, if it's going to hit the network, it's going to be blocking. So if you load up a website, it's going to go fetch a load of JavaScript, you're not going to be able to scroll around or do anything until this is all done and dusted. On Node, less of an issue because we're hitting the disk. It's not that big a deal. But on web, it's bad. Like this is synchronous module loading. Kind of sucks. So as part of the standard, TC39 came out with this. So if you have a JavaScript engine, if you have these three functions, pretty much, you can handle modules. Just those three. Anyone can do it. It'd be great. First one, parse module. This is going from some file somewhere. You get an AST. Shout out to Ed. ASTs. Plus a load of other metadata. We'll get back to that in a sec. You also have module.instantiate. This is where we get these module records that we parse out those files and actually start connecting them all up. Standard, makes sense. And then evaluate, module.evaluate. It all goes live and code starts executing. Super cool. So just those three. Parse, instantiate, evaluate. OK, so here's what's weird. Parse module, like file to module record. Where do you get the files from? So this is undefined behavior in the ECMAScript standard. This is intentional. It's good to have undefined behavior. For web, it's great. This is actually covered by the HTML standard. It's a good standard. So on web, it's all pretty straightforward. You have a script tag. You put an extra property in it that says, like, hey, this is referring to a module. So interpret it. Use parse module to parse it all in. And the HTML standard means that the browser can go fetch all the modules it needs. It's all great. A little bit harder on Node. There's no nice way to kind of tell the difference between an ES module and a CommonJS module. Now, right at the start, I showed those. It was the same file twice. Big difference between those files, aside from one's CommonJS, one's an ES module, is use strict. So ES modules, you don't have to include use strict. It's all in strict mode. That's quite a big deal. You actually, if you're writing CommonJS stuff, you should still be putting use strict in there. It just means that it's not running in sloppy mode. There's a load of performance benefits, and it's less weird. So there's no easy way to immediately read a file and tell that it's an ES module. Even if you don't have imports, you may have like a dynamic import. There's a whole load of things with ES modules where in the spec, certain keywords are only really available in an ES module. You can't really tell that stuff beforehand. So some prototyping of ES modules with Node means I've come to the conclusion that we're going to try out using MJS to tell the difference. It's one option, may not be the final option. But But this whole thing of getting all the files and then collecting them all together in an asynchronous way is pretty cool. And there may actually be some performance benefits. Like we all know Node and the benefit of having async I/O versus synchronous I/O. If we can fetch more module records before we've finished evaluating them all, then we may have a startup thing, a startup benefit. This probably affects things like, I'd say, lambdas more than your regular like Express server or whatever you want to use. In fact, you can actually get some performance benefits from lambdas just by minifying your node code if you ever wanted to do that. It's weird, but you can. But yeah, there are performance benefits. But if you actually try this with the current experimental modules flag, it is actually slower than CommonJS. But performance stuff may come later. The other cool thing is these bindings that we have between the module records are actually live bindings. That means that they share memory, roughly. And the coolest thing is that because you have all these modules ahead of time and haven't evaluated anything, you can actually do cyclic dependencies, and it's not weird. It's like, I like cyclic dependencies now. And then module.evaluate. So the big thing that's kind of risky with all this is that implementations can change. The spec, like I said, there's lots of undefined behavior, and so a lot of it's up for interpretation. And the bad thing with that is that you can change the evaluation order could change over time. Let's see how well this plays. So if everyone remembers, playing all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. So evaluation order is a big deal. I mean, if it's what you expect from a computer to execute stuff in the order that you expect it to. So experimental modules is still experimental. Don't use it in production. If you're using some kind of transpiler that's kind of lets you have the syntax of ESModules, but doesn't really have the kind of asynchronous module loading, there may be some surprises. Just a heads up. It's not all just nice syntax. Experimental modules has been around since Node, I think, 8.5. So it's been some time. There's a lot of feedback that's come back from it. Yeah. Here's a load of it. This doesn't include the massive Google Doc of user stories that I had to read through. There's loads of odd bits and edge cases that people have found that we need to fix with ESModules in Node. The big four that we have to deal with are spec compliance, duh. Module equivalence, yeah, that makes sense. Don't break CommonJS, yeah. But the interesting one, no refactoring. So this is the Babel issue. So Babel has been really super amazing for trying out new standards, seeing what sticks, seeing what's great, allows us to iterate a lot quicker when it comes up, when people are coming up with standards. But it does pose an issue where at some point, if you're transpiling stuff and you're trying out new stuff, once Node supports that, you probably turn off that transpiler, or at least you turn off that bit that you meant to have support for. This could be a breaking change, so there is a goal to try and see what we can do about avoiding any kind of refactoring that you may have to do when you turn off your transpiler. So that's the gubbins and the tricky bits. All this work, where people are going through the issues that we have with ESModules and what to do next, all that discussion is done on this repo. You can go check it out. It's great. Love it. These people are all working on getting the answers for all the questions that have come up. They have actually published a plan this week for how the new implementation will work. They're starting with essentially a small kernel just to get consensus rather than having a minimum kind of thing, and slowly build it over time, and hopefully we have something that we can all agree on, which would be great. So yeah, all of this, in summary, like there's a lot of hard work that's being done to make development easy. This may seem like really complicated, but hopefully in the end, we'll just have something that you can kind of plug in, play. Oh, this all works as I expected. This is fine. That's what all this work is being done to achieve. If you're really curious about it, go check out github.com/node.js/modules. If anyone asks you, like, what's the state of ESModules? All you have to remember is that there's a repo where you can go check on it. That's all you have to say. It's fine. And I'm Andy. There we go.